I have one on the front lawn.
Yeah, I have one on mine too. I put Christmas lights in my pallet that's a flag out there today.
So we'll do a pledge. I think we can all find our own flags, and next time we'll put one on the screen.
The flag.
So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States.
Yeah.
To
For which it one nation
under God, indivisible,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody, for joining our first virtual meeting. Very much appreciate it. And so I'm going to, if people will bear with me for a second, I'm going to talk a little bit about the need for this the need to be meeting virtually rather than meeting in person, and some of the requirements that have been asked of us in order to make this, to conduct ourselves in this way. And then I'm just going to talk a little bit about, I think, Zoom and the system that we're using, some of its, maybe some of its limitations, and then also some of its advantages. And then maybe some of it would just be helpful for me to talk through, as I'm going to be tasked with trying to facilitate a pretty lively group. And I'm going to do my best, but I want to at least set out how I think I can do that and sort of accomplish what we're going to need to accomplish, recognizing that I'm sure that's all going to change and we're going to have to adapt as we go. So I'll start off on the need for the emergency meeting. So as everybody is well aware, the governor has issued emergency orders, and so meeting in person is not an option. And so there's been waivers that the governor has put out through executive order that allows for public boards like ours to hold public meetings, but do so virtually. Previously, if we were going to hold a virtual meeting, we couldn't do it with a majority of the board. That it was a majority of the board had to be physically present. So that has been waived, which allows us to conduct ourselves this way. But these are still public meetings, and so the public has a right to be present and to hear this conversation. And so we have supplied a call-in number. So there's a phone number that members of the public can access and listen to. We'll be doing minutes and following the right to know law strictly as we always have done. So minutes will be available from these conversations. Hopefully we'll be able to get a video and share the video of these conversations as well. Steve and I and Andrea talked a bit about how to run this first of our virtual meetings, especially with the public and public participation. And so for this first meeting, we made the decision that we're not going to have sort of a public forum or public participation portion. I think mostly for real two reasons. One, I think, is the first is this is all sort of new to us as a board. And so I think living into this a little bit for us makes some sense and getting used to it and how we want to operate. And then the second piece is just really maybe more prevalent or more on point just in terms of facilitation, how to actually accomplish numbers of members of public who want to participate and join us and be able to provide comment. Not sure we have that entirely figured out using Zoom and sort of the technology that we have. And so I think rather than flub it or not doing it in a way that honored sort of those people who wanted to participate and all of us, we decided to not have that portion tonight. We will, our next meeting is a week from today, so we will have it figured out by then, and we will have public participation. For the public who may be watching this or listening, all of our emails are available on the website. So if you do have comments, you do have things to say, please reach out to any board member or to the superintendent, because we do want to hear from you. I think this is, for just tonight, a sort of a limitation on how much we can get done and facilitate in this sort of first meeting as we're trying to pull all this together. So bear with us. We will do a better job, and we do want to provide a public forum for people to provide comments to us. And so the next piece I want to talk briefly about is just Zoom and how I'm hoping that we're going to be able to facilitate this conversation a little bit. So the first thing, and I asked when we jumped on, is for everybody to mute themselves. And really, I think that's for the benefit of all of us. I know my house is a little bit chaotic. I have dogs and kids and noises, and so by when we're not speaking, having ourselves on mute, we sort of enable all of us, everybody else on the call, to be able to hear what each other's saying without sort of that background noise that someone might have at their home sort of cutting through. So muting and unmuting yourself is easy. You just press on the button and you're unmuted. But when we're not speaking, it would be great if we can all mute ourselves. The second thing, if we're using video, and most of us are, just know that we're all watching you. And so just be aware of that. I know sometimes I forget that the camera's on and I may do something stupid, but just, again, it's sort of a self-awareness thing that we are on video and the rest of us can see what you're doing. And then, like anybody's been on conference calls, Zoom is sort of the same way. So when you have two people talking at the same time, no one can hear or understand anything that either one of those two people are saying. So talking over each other is a real challenge. And so what I'm going to ask everybody to do, if you, let's see, it should work. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So if you use your mouse and you go down to the bottom of your screen on the thing that says participants, and you click on the participants tab, what it's going to do is show on your right-hand side of the screen a list of all of us, which is wonderful. So all of our names are there. And then over on the bottom right, there's a button that says raise your hand. Everybody will click that quickly. So what you see is you get this little virtual hand raised. And then if you unclick it, you will unraise your hand. And so what I'm going to ask as a facilitator, I'm going to keep all your beautiful faces on my screen as much as I can, so I can see all of your body language. And if you're waving your arms, I can pick up that cue that you might want to say something. And the other way is if you do want something, you do have something to say, click on that raise your hand button, and that way I'll be able to see that you want to jump in, and I'll be able to call on you. You can then unmute your line and then speak, and that way it would be some sense of order around speaking order and how people can participate. It's not perfect, it's a little clunky at times, but it does help keep people sort of talking over each other. And I will do my best to keep an eye on both your body language as well as those hands that are raised. And then the only thing I would just ask is if it's possible, unless I'm really screwing up, to wait till you're called on. So that way we know who's next and who's talking, and there's some sort of order to it. Otherwise, I've had Zoom calls of 10 people that get extremely chaotic. So bear with me. I'm learning as I go as well. But hopefully these ground rules will help us at least have an orderly discussion as we go through this. So maybe I'll stop and ask if there's any questions or any thoughts, or does that all sound good? Thumbs up. Awesome. Okay. So the only other ground rules and this is really just for the board members here. So we're going to be taking votes as we go along, even on things like minutes. And so because we're not all in person, this is virtual, it's going to take on just another step in the process. So when we vote on a motion that's made, what I'm going to do is call on the board members individually. And so you just unmute yourself, and what you're going to have to say is your name and then how you wish to vote. And this is part of the requirements that we have. So as an example, I would say Jim O'Brien, and I would say Jim O'Brien votes yes, and then I would call on the next board member as a way for us to be able to record everybody's votes. And for any board member who may have anybody else who's going to be in the room with you, just announce that person's name just so we can record it, as well as being someone who participated or was part of the meeting. That's another requirement that we need to meet. Steve Chamberlain, did I leave anything out that we're supposed to discuss in terms of the 91A and our electronic meeting guidelines?
No, I think you went through that. The only thing, if someone does come in, I think we're supposed to announce that if someone else is present for a board member remotely. But I think you did great.
Man, first time for everything. All right. So, oh, did someone just wave their hand? Jay. Oh, you're on mute, Jay. You got to unmute yourself.
How's that?
That's perfect.
I think one thing we might want to keep in mind with respect to 91A is that we all probably shouldn't be chatting between each other. I don't think that gets, this is the first time I've done Zoom, but I think we want to make sure that doesn't happen, because that's a record that doesn't get, I don't think gets recorded.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, so there is and that's probably something, Jay, you're right, we should probably turn that off at some point, or at least for tonight, not use it, and we can kind of see if we can remove that, because yeah, having private conversations in between ourselves is not in keeping with 91A. All right, so I am going to put the agenda back on so I can keep track of where we are. So let's see. So Steve, are there any additions or deletions from the agenda?
No, I think under the distance learning, we can discuss the governor's announcement today about the May 4th and the more restrictive environment, but I think we can cover that under distance learning update, if that's all right with you.
Sounds great. How about correspondence?
There are none tonight.
All right. I just lost my tab. All right, so we'll start with the approval of minutes. So I'd ask for a motion to approve the regular board minutes held, to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on March 19th. Seth? Oh, is that a wave to somebody else?
No, that was a wave to someone else. All right.
Seth, would you like to make a motion to approve the minutes? There you go. Say it again.
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Perfect.
Oh, this is Andrea Folsom.
Thanks, Andrea. Any discussion? Okay, so we'll do this by roll call. So I'll start with Norm. So Norm, unmute yourself.
Yes, this is Norm Kupel. I say yes.
Thank you. Seth.
Seth A. Frame votes yes.
Andrea.
Andrea Folsom votes yes.
Rob.
Rob votes yes.
And Jim O'Brien votes yes. All right, and so then we have non-public meeting minutes of March 19th, 2020. And so I would ask if there is a motion to approve.
I move to approve the non-public minutes. Seth A. Frame making the motion.
Is there a second?
I second. Oh, sorry, Andrea.
No, it's fine.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Norm, we'll start with you.
Norm Kupel says yes.
Seth?
Seth A. Frame votes yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato says yes.
Andrea?
Andrea Folsom votes yes.
And Jim O'Brien votes yes. Thanks, everyone. I know that's a little tedious, but necessary. Next item on the agenda are going to be comments from the Hopkinton School Board. And so we're delighted that Ella is joining us here tonight. Ella, I hope your distance learning is going great. It's really nice to see you. So maybe we'll start with you.
It's definitely going. It's interesting. I think all the teachers are really working hard to make it work for the students, so that's great. And now that it's extended, it should definitely be more interesting.
Well, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Why don't we turn it over to Andrea. Andrea, do you have any comments tonight before we start?
Yeah, I think just to echo what Ella said, this has been week one. I have kids at Harold Martin and Maple Street, and so I've gotten to get a good look at what distance looks like for both of them. It's really different, but I think right now I'm most impressed with the teachers being really flexible and very available. So I just want to voice my appreciation for that. It's been very helpful.
Great, thanks. Rob?
Yeah, so I've been watching this from Command Central, which was the kitchen table, and now a desk set up in front of the picture window, and it's been very impressive to watch. Lots of collaboration, students calling in. People are working pretty hard to make it function well for everybody.
Seth.
I've been very impressed with what I've seen my kids doing. I'd say that I've seen sort of two different models. One model, which is sort of plow ahead, do what we've always been doing, which I think is good to give continuity. But I've also seen some teachers with very thoughtful assignments about what's going on in the world, giving kids podcasts and videos and other forms of media, and then having them write thoughts about what's going on, because all of this is confusing. And to give them some time to think about it and to write on it and reflect on it, I think is helpful for them. I personally had the experience of attempting to teach an intro to law class through Google Meet. It's a challenge. It is definitely a challenge to engage with the students. I've taught in the classroom many times, and I enjoy doing that, and I find it easy. And I didn't find this as easy because you're not seeing them. You're not connecting in the same way. So there are definite drawbacks, but you know, it's what we have, and I'm just impressed with how hard, both on the kids side and the teacher side, everyone is trying to make the best of what is not a good situation. So good job to everyone.
So I heard from an inside source, Seth, that you did a great job with that class. So thanks for doing it. Norm.
Hi. Pretty much echo what everyone is saying. I want to say thank you to Steve and his team for a great week. It is an absolute challenge what they're trying to do, and I'm just very proud of everyone that's involved. I must say it's been quite challenging as the parent of three going through this process, but I have to say it's given me a completely different insight of how our teachers we're so fortunate to have amazing teachers, because you know, I've had to work and educate my children at the same time, and the teachers have been really well prepared, and they've also been really receptive to the kids. So I have enjoyed Bill's song in the morning, by the way. That's been enjoyable for me to listen to at 6 o'clock in the morning. But Steve, your team has done a fantastic job, and I really wanted to let you know that I'm very proud, and we got to get through this hurdle. And Jim, I appreciate you chairing us through this meeting tonight, because we've got business to do and a new way of communicating now, but governor is saying, and really focus on keeping a distance and everything. So I want to thank the district for providing care to our students, and that's what I have to say tonight.
Thanks, Norm. And I just want to echo what everybody said. It is quite amazing. Just a week ago, it was a little over a week ago is when we started our kids and the teachers putting all this together, and it is quite amazing. Each day, the distance learning seems to be getting better and better. And for me as a parent, I think I'm learning new tools that I didn't know I even had in my toolbox in order to help my 9-year-old read while helping my 16-year-old through some math homework that I don't even understand. But anyway, it is quite amazing. So echoing Norm, kudos, Steve, to you and your team for pulling this all together. And while not seamless, the train's running pretty darn well. So much appreciated. All right, so next is presentations and staff reports. And when we had originally sort of thought about this meeting, we really wanted to give the opportunity to the new board members, and then also refresh us older board members, and give the public some updates on project has been going through over the past year and more. And so we're really delighted that Jay Burgess and Gordon Bristol have joined us along with Steve and Michelle to really just sort of give an overview of where the project is and why those decisions were made, and then, you know, what does the next couple months look like? Because we're going to have some decisions as a board that we're going to have to make. We could talk a little bit about the schedule moving forward, and then answer. I'm sure everybody is bringing a lot of questions with them and concerns with them here tonight. So the idea is to sort of, you know, spend a bit of time, you know, dissecting the project, making sure everybody understands where we are, and then is maybe not ready, but is prepared to make some of the decisions that are going to come down the pike. So when we thought about, you know, the general topics, and one was sort of asking, you know, Steve, and I think our Dean of Building Projects, Jay Burgess, to sort of talk about just an overview, you know, how we got here. And then, you know, talk just quickly about the building committee, what it is, what it's been doing. We'll have a financial update, you know, how we can get the money to pay for this, and how the schedule for that. And the budget, bids, and then upcoming decisions that we're going to make. So that's sort of the general overview and outline. And I think I'm going to turn it over to, actually, I don't know. So I'm going to turn it over to either Steve or Jay to sort of help us talk through a bit of the overview of the project and where we're at.
Sure. Can you hear me okay, Jim? I'll start. And I don't know how my Wi-Fi seems to be jumping, but is everybody okay with it at the moment?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay, so I'm going to take us through the formation of the committee, and then Jay's going to pick us up from there. So just a little bit of background. So I arrived in 1999, which is about 2 years after the 97 project, which was $7 million. And that was implemented, really, we were making changes at the high school when I was there as assistant principal. And then about 6 years after that, Dr. Ayers came back from a meeting and said, we're not bonded to the full amount. We should do another bond. And so back then we started another facility project. And with Frank Marinese, it was about a $13 to $14 million project that once we got that number, it was a 3-school renovation. Once we got that number, it was actually tabled. Without a bond coming off, the community felt, the board felt at that time pretty strongly that we couldn't do a piggyback bond. So we were projecting forward. I became superintendent, and actually this project started, believe it or not, in October of 2012. That was when I made a presentation. We did an In Focus, a board meeting focused just on facilities. I reviewed all the NEASC. I reviewed all the reports. We did a lot of just background information and looked ahead to see where we were when the bond was going to come off in 2017. So at that time, in October 2012, we went on a session where we wanted to get the community's input. So for that first year, we did facility Friday. So we invited, I'd say 50, 60, 70 people toured our schools. We had pizza on Friday and talked about the facility project. And back then, every single person said that it was time to refurbish our schools. So it was a right start in 2012. It was about gaining public feedback. And then the board was very cognizant of this being a 20-year decision. So we spent another year trying to figure out the answers to 2 questions. One question was, do we have an appetite to enlarge our footprint? Would we pursue a Warner, a Webster, a Henniker, and even Dunbarton back then? Would we take a look at that? Was there any appetite in the community to enlarge our footprint? Because that would impact the facility project. The other question that we asked was there an appetite to look at a new school configuration? Do we want to look at a K-6? Do we want to look on a K-5, a 6 through 12? So we did about 6 listening posts in all the buildings, and we solicited public feedback. And the answers to those 2 questions, one was there was not an appetite to enlarge our footprint. People believe almost universally that coming to Hopkinton, they made a choice for one town, one school, and they didn't come for regional school, and they didn't want to see at that time this project support a regional type approach to school. So that was feedback. And then the other feedback was, yes, we could take a look at people really liked the 6 through 12, the 6, 7, 8, and 6 through 12. So that was worth pursuing. So the board charged or accepted the charge to form a facility committee. And back then the charge was, the very first charge, and Jay will pick it up in a minute, was design and development of 2 buildings. So this was when we were dropping down to 860, and we started this work with just 2 schools, a P through 5 and a 6 through 12. And we solicited, we did a lot of work, and that's when Jay came into the picture. Jay was named chair of the building committee. And Jay, you want to take it from there?
Sure, Steve. Thank you. So this was spring of 2015 that the charge was given and the committee was formed. Again, I think it's important to emphasize that the original charge specifically mentioned a 2-school footprint. And it wasn't ironed out for certain, but the part of the original charge, it was to look at a 2-school footprint. Not only the consolidation, but the upgrade, understanding that there was a fair amount of deferred maintenance due. The committee formed with 6 subcommittees, each one of the subcommittee chairs as the main committee participants. The subcommittees were finance and energy efficiency, safety and security, accessibility and special services, community partnerships and school repurposing, primary education specs, and secondary education specs. We really had a talented group of individuals. The committee chairs were remarkable, and the groups that they had supporting them were also a very good cross-section of the community. I think we had over 50 people involved in this. Everybody had an opportunity to meet, solicit their feedback. We met regularly. Thinking back and keeping in mind we're going back 5 years now, we were meeting, I think, monthly at that point, more often as needed. As we approach critical mileposts, we may meet more. Was to select and engage a architecture and engineering firm to help us with planning the conceptual plans and the costing. Over that summer of 2015, we did a number of site visits. We formulated an RFP, did a number of site visits, had interviews with a number of firms, and we ultimately selected Harriman. They had their modeling was by far superior to all of the other firms that we interviewed, and we started working with them to come up with the conceptual plans, the detailed condition assessment, and what will ultimately be their final report. I think it's important is on the shared drive, so all this information is available. We spent quite a bit of time over 2015 and 2016 gathering the condition and demographic data we needed to develop the conceptual plans and the preliminary cost estimates that we had pretty much tightened up by late spring of 2016. As the summer progressed, one of the things that we began to see, Steve and his staff began to clue us in that there was a growing enrollment in the kindergarten. And at the time, all of our assumption had been based on, for the most part, 3, and correct me if my terminology is wrong, but 3-section classes. So 3 classes of first graders, 3 classes of second graders, so on and so forth, which supported the contention that we needed to be looking at a 2-school footprint. What we began to see that summer, again, that's 2016, was that enrollment was growing rapidly, and that whole contention probably was worth looking at again and revisiting. On top of that, we saw that the construction costs were really beginning to come up, not only to build the limited amount of additional space we knew that we needed if we were going to be on a 2-school project, but in view of the enrollment coming up as it did, this was presenting us with some serious issues. There was even space issues on the lots. So faced with that and what was ultimately a bumper class of kindergartners in the fall of 2016, we commissioned a report through NESDAQ, New England, Steve will have to correct me on that, the superintendent's group was able to produce a demographic report that was a little bit more broader than the one that we had been using, which was based on internal data. At that point, it was pretty clear that we would be a mistake to look at just a 2-school footprint. So we began to consider what we would do with a 3-school footprint. A new charge came from the board in October of 2016 that changed quite a bit from the original charge, and effectively it said we need to be looking at a 3-school footprint, and the items for consideration should include but be not limited to most effective building and school grade configuration, the edge specs necessary to deliver a high quality program, resolution of safety and security concerns, accessibility deficiencies. The deficiencies that were noted in the NEASC report, that was something that had been hanging since 2012 that needed to be addressed. The warnings were becoming more and more urgent from NEASC that we needed to take action. We also looked at relocation and consolidation with the SAU building because, as we know, that's in poor condition. And we also wanted to make sure that we included the community in any of the decisions. Are the district buildings meeting the needs of the community as a whole, not just the school district participants? And last but not least was the overall cost. We knew that even with the bond coming off, this was going to be a very expensive project, and one that was we really needed to be focused on cost containment. So with that charge going forward, we went to, we started to look more at the 3-school footprint, and by the spring of 2017, we had some options, some pricing options and recommendations from Harriman that the committee took and developed the report, which we delivered to the board in the summer of 2017, which basically called for a $30 million project that it grew the high school. It made access control features at the other 2 schools. It addressed the deferred maintenance. It resolved the issue with the elevator at the middle high school, and a host of other issues that that had been hanging for a while. And it did not include the relocation of the SAU building, and it did not include performance space at the middle high school. Those were 2 options that we looked at, we priced, but eventually we did not recommend that be entertained in the project because we were already, at that point at $30 million, we knew it was a pretty substantial project, and with much debate, that was what we presented to the board. At that point, I think more people began to be involved because of the price. So I think you'll recollect that the board accepted the report, but ultimately decided not to move forward on that. So in January of 2018, the board pulled the recommendation of moving forward on that report. But we did, because of this interest, we did get a lot of really good feedback at that March meeting in 2018. Primarily that there was an appetite for a project, but certainly not a $30 million project. So based on the feedback that we received at the meeting, we did a survey, and some of the conversations that we had anecdotally with people in the community, information that the board had heard and passed along, we received, I guess this would be our 3rd charge. And that was to look at this in a tiered approach to meet certain dollar figures and hit certain elements only, but there was really no list of priorities and no final scope. So understanding that, to move forward with this, we needed to move fairly quickly because we're already into, going into April at this point. A small working group came together, again, working with Harriman over that summer to come up with several options to address access and accessibility, basic safety and security, and all the deferred maintenance that had piled up. So we came forward with the scaled down plan that incorporated their revisions. And additionally, there was opportunity for a pay for performance contract with Siemens. That allowed certain elements, I think ultimately over $1 million worth of deferred maintenance to be pulled out and addressed in a pay for performance contract. If you're not familiar with that particular format, there's quite a bit to it, but essentially it allows the district to finance these improvements based on the savings and their energy use. I'll leave it at that now, and if anybody has any more questions, we can go into more detail later. But between the pay for performance contract and $800,000 Homeland Security grant, we were able to do quite a bit of work at the district. So backing that work out, and we looked at several more projects over the summer. We did receive several alternates, including a plan that would, at the middle high school, would turn the orientation around so that the entry is currently what's in the back. It was a pretty clever design. I have to credit Harriman on that. It was thoughtful. It met most of our needs, but it was still costly. There was a lot of construction involved still. And the prices of construction really began to ramp up at that particular time in 2018. So even with the scaled down project, we were still, if we had exercised the option of the new entries, we'd be back up, I think, $28 million. So understanding that that wasn't going to fly, we pared it down even more and really broke it down to the very basics: deferred maintenance, the basic safety and security. We heard again and again that the science labs at the middle high school needed to be addressed, so we included those. And now, I would say 3 years into increased enrollment, we're beginning to feel the pressure at Harold Martin to make sure we had enough space there. So we came up with what Harriman will call the 4 classroom but net 3 option, which involved the construction of 4 classrooms, but because we had to come in through, we needed to join the addition in the current building somewhere, it basically chopped up a classroom. So we'd really only be net 3 on that particular plan. And that was the plan that was approved at the district meeting in March of 2019. So I think most of you know the details of that. I do have that information available, what exactly we were looking for, but that is the fundamental aspect of what we brought forward, and what Mr. Gordon Bristol, who Steve will introduce you here momentarily, is taking to move forward into the next stage, which is the design and the construction of this project. I don't know how I'm certainly willing to wait around till the end if we have any more questions, but that's pretty much everything I had.
Jay, that was great. That was really thorough. Thank you so much. I learned a lot listening to you. Before we move on, I think to the next piece, does anybody have any questions for Jay, specific to sort of the history or what, sort of either wave at me or just raise your hand on the side. All right, seeing no questions. Steve, do you want to introduce Gordon? Unmute yourself first. There we go.
Michelle next. We're talking a little bit about budget and a little bit about just the bond schedule and how we're handling the finances. So that's all right. Michelle, are you out there?
I am. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So one of the documents in your packet was the bond schedule. So I guess I'll start there. So the way our process has been going so far, we really, although we've incurred a lot of contracts, we haven't spent a lot of money, which is great because obviously we don't have our bond yet. So thanks, Jim, for putting that up. So as you can see, and this, well, I'll confirm in an email, but I can't imagine that this schedule is going to be altered by anything with what has transpired over the last week or so. Anyways, it's May 8th is when the application is due. Now, the application is lots of different documents, but it's not all of the pricing information or the useful life schedule of some of the deferred maintenance items, as well as pricing. So that information needs to be provided to Bond Bank by June 1st. I've been already working. The town, believe it or not, has a large part of the big chunk of an application because it's all of us together. So it looks at the taxpayers, you know, who the large ones are, you know, how have the collections been for the taxes, different things like that. And then I've actually got the supervisors, the checklist. I got Miss Lightfoot, she signed it. I thought it was going to be at school district meeting, but I just sent it in the mail, and she did confirm that it was an actual vote by the body last year, as well as the school district clerk. I put that in the mail as well, so that we can move things along without having people have to come in and do those kind of things. So I would say within the next 3 weeks or so, we'll have a big chunk, if not all, of the application ready. Now, one thing that we haven't even talked about as a committee yet, that should probably come up soon, is the bond ratings are amazing. Meaning we should do fairly well when we actually do go out and get the bond. The last bond rating came in a little over 2%. And it's projected to be probably lower than that sale that happened. So one question, and I do have updated schedules, is should we look at, we've committed to 20 years, but if it's the same potential dollars as far as our budget for next year and the following year, should we look at maybe going to 15? But right now, we're looking at 20. That's why I point that out is because that's an important thing that the committee and then the board is going to have to decide on before we submit the application, because that is an item in the application that you have to put. For now, I have it as 20, but because the market has been so great, Steve had brought it up to actually get the a schedule for 15 years based on kind of like what happened at the last sale. That's pretty much it on the bond schedule for now. I mean, you can see a lot of the stuff, like we have bond counsel. So Renelle, who's a member of the community, we did contract with the firm she works for. So she's going to be doing a lot after we get the application in. And so the sale is scheduled for July 14th, excuse me. And then we would close around August 11th and get the proceeds shortly thereafter. So the way we're going at this project so far is we've spent just under $66,000. And I don't think it was part of the packet, but if you go to the building committee at some point, if you look at the March meeting envelope or the February one, the financials are always in those meetings. So it has kind of like a project document that I just created through Excel or Google Docs that kind of gives each contract that we've done so far and what the PO number is and what we've committed to and what we spent so far, as well as a printout of our financial system to have you see that actually both numbers agree. So I'd be glad to answer any more questions with that, but that's pretty much what I had with that.
Thanks, Michelle. That was great. I saw that Norm had his hand raised. So Norm.
Yeah, Jim, thanks. I appreciate it. Michelle, so when we apply our application for this, we have to go in with the terms of either 15 or 20 years. We can't kind of get a rate for both, right? It has to be either 15 or 20.
Right, because I think that's how it's packaged. I'll confirm that, but that is an item that they have on there because then they want you to do kind of like a dummy version of a debt schedule type thing.
Yeah, because I was thinking for the budget for next year, I kind of want to see what our first payment would have been with the 15 and then with the 20 and see how much we'd save in interest in 5 years between the two proposals and kind of look at where we would be potentially between saving and 5 years. You know what I'm saying?
I do, and I think that's why I think when we have our next building committee meeting showing, because we have an updated 20 and an updated 15 based on that last sale of what their percentages were. So it would have been nice to, because it is going to be low, it would have been nice to even go looking at 10, but I did have them look at 10, but that was definitely out of the realm.
Yeah, but I would assume that you could probably get 2 rates, because when you buy a car or something like that, they give you the opportunity to choose what option's best for you. So I'd be curious to see what they would say to a proposal of a 15 and 20 to see if there's any different numbers in that. So.
Yeah, I'll email when I email about if there's any changes based on what's going on in the world today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Norm. Rob. Oh, Rob, you're muted.
There we go.
There you go.
Quick question for Michelle. Is it possible to look at those 2 numbers in terms of the tax impact?
They actually, I believe, are on both documents, that it actually gives you what the tax impact is.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Michelle? All right, Michelle, thank you so much. And all those financial documents are in the folder. So any other questions, or you want to look at the dollars that we have committed thus far, that's all publicly available and available to the board. Okay, so now I think it's time for Steve to introduce Gordon.
Absolutely. Gordon Bristol, thank you. I appreciate you making yourself available. Gordon is our owner's project representative, our manager, our OPM. He's going to walk us through just the process from the bids, the budget, and the the additional add alternate process. So Gordon, thank you.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the new board members, and for the ones who have been on before this, as you said, you always learn something new as we talk down through this. So thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to work with you. So what we've done now is your group over the last 5 years has really created a team. The team starting with the board, yourselves. The next integral part is the building committee, our facilities committee, which Jay is working with. And you then have your superintendent and your finance director, and that's your team. So the additional tools that needed to be brought on board is last year in the spring, you went to a bond vote. You appropriated $9.796 million, and it is now time to go to work with that. So we needed an architect and a construction manager to get our arms around exactly what it is that you promised the people last January, your citizens last January. And can we now go and get the team together to do the drawings and build a school for that dollar amount? And that's what's been going on since about the middle of last summer. We interviewed architectural firms and chose upon H.L. Turner, who's your neighbor up the street in Concord. And H.L. Turner has, we basically had a good group of architects that we looked at, but we wanted ones especially with school experience and especially with occupied school experience, because it's one thing to build a Walmart out in the middle of a field. It's another thing to remodel a school with children in the next room over. So we've got together an architect firm that knows that, and H.L. Turner is serving us well. We then went out to get our construction managers firm. The construction manager firm is, the way a construction manager, a short primer on that is, basically, we will be doing an open book purchasing of this. So a construction manager, if you were to be building your house at home, where you go and talk to a builder and say, how much for this house? And the builder's going to say, well, that's going to be $1 million house. Well, you know that somewhere in there, the builder has carried 15% for profit. And they've also carried maybe 10% for unknowns, because they don't know what you're going to change your mind on. That's not a good way to build a $9.7 million school. A construction manager, basically, they are our advocate. They are part of our team. They will be responsible for everything with the construction side, but it's all an open book. So you folks on the school board we'll be able to come over. You can say, Gordon, for example, show us the bids on the electrical service that we're getting. You probably won't get to that level of detail, but we like to let you know that it's available. It is what I call open book. So the reason by doing that is if we make any changes up or down, we get to see that savings or that impact. So for example, if you were to choose a type of carpet for your buildings and it hits the target price that the construction manager has, sooner you may decide, well, what if we went with a little more durable carpet? Well, part of our job, me as the owner's rep and as the architect, is to tell you, don't worry about the durability. We're not going to spec anything that's not going to last you a lifetime. But if you want us to run that orchestration, we can do that for you and show you what a different, and then if that price went up, for example, $15,000 over the course of the project, we would see just that $15,000 impact. You wouldn't have that variable that is the builder cutting it somewhere else. So we have a good process. The construction manager firm is BPS out of Laconia, New Hampshire. Again, well experienced, right up the road. And I think now you can see how we have the many arms of a good team to go forward. I'll take a pause of a breath there, and I'm going to then talk about what we have on paper now. No hands raising much, so I'll continue right along. First of all, we march with, very simply, the group that I am working with, the architect, construction manager, myself, along with your administration. We have a set dollar amount. There's no other kitty we can go grab more money. So we basically reverse engineer all this. We have $9.796 million to spend, period, not a penny more. So what we have been doing is meeting with your staff, your administration, your staff, and the previous board. And what is it that you want to have in your buildings? What is it that you promised the public last year? I believe it was a January 10th meeting, and the school board adopted it January 24th of 2019. You made certain promises to your community. We've been able now to do the schematic drawings and make that commit. We've been able to make what was promised at the meetings fit. We, on a week from Tuesday, the way the process works, we vet everything with the facilities committee, and we're going to go to the facilities committee a week from this next Tuesday and show them how we are on budget with our, what I call back of the envelope budget on this, where we have looked at the 3 schools and what we're going to have for costs, and we are going to be able to do it for the dollar amount. But there's a process, and we want to vet that through the facilities committee, but we can give you a little bit of a heads up. We're doing okay. It's been a lot of work, but that's what we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 months on this, was to listen to all your faculty and your administration. What do they need? What was promised? And do a schematic set of drawings. And those drawings are published. Those are on your site. And they're out. I believe that's true, Steve, right? That they are indeed on the site. He'll get that.
Steve, you're on mute. I don't know if Steve, you want to answer that, just so we're
Yeah, I'm not sure they're there yet. I think
Okay.
we wanted to wait for a little bit more, but I think at the next facility committee meeting, I think they're going.
Sorry. And Steve's very good, by the way, at making sure I don't get ahead of myself, and I do tend to get ahead. So those are not yet up on the board, but they will be in a week and a half. Again, we have to go through the process of the committee. So we'll put a period on that. What's the next step? What's the next couple months going to look like? Well, the next thing that's being worked on is the design development documents. That's basically the next level of detail documents. Those are going to be ready in a week and a half to publish and have out there. And we will be having sets of product ready to put out to bid on May 1st for the high school and for Maple Street. And then on May 19th, we will have the Harold Martin. So what that means is those are ready to go out there to bid to the public and bid from the various trades. Now, this is where the team works. The dates that I just gave you are very important because they have to dovetail what Michelle needs to take to the bond bank. So we will have everything ready for Michelle's bond bank visit on, we'll just use the hypothetical that May 15th is when we are hitched. So all of this, there's many pieces that are now falling into place in a very good way, but that's why the team approach has worked. So we will be ready to assist you there with what you need for the bond bank. We are looking to possibly even begin construction. We'll have to see how the end of your school year ends, but the idea was to go in and begin some construction this summer. Okay, and that's certainly still the intent. Now, we do have the effect of the current shutdowns that are going on, and I could give you, in a few minutes, I'll give you my crystal ball on what I think those will do. But for the meantime, the big things for you folks to be watching for on the school board, and you'll have some input, will be the final design and getting things ready to go out to bid. Now, on the bid side as well, I'd like you to know that the entire team believes in buying local. So if any of you have a neighbor, a friend, or somebody you want to get into the bid pile, please let us know. We put them in there, we let them competitively bid, and that way you don't have a local person saying, gee, I can do that electrical work. Why didn't I get a chance to bid on it? So again, as school board members and representing your community, feel free to bring any names forward. We don't treat them any different than any others, but we want to make sure that everybody that you want to get forward, even if it's a 1 or a 2 person company, there's work for everybody. So please send those along to us. Let's talk about where we might go with the construction side. So I mentioned we will have things ready.
Hey Gordon. I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you? Because Rob raised his hand. I don't know if it was on the point that you had just made. So I don't know, Rob, if you want to ask a question.
So just a quick question. I don't know if it's for Gordon or for Steve, but in terms of getting that message out to local contractors, is that something that we can do through the website, through an email, through something, so that 2-3 months down the road, people aren't coming back saying, well, I wasn't aware. A little bit more than, I know somebody, but versus really making an effective effort to reach out to the local contractors, of which we have a lot in town.
Absolutely, we can certainly do that, and we've already, people are watching this because of people are watching this project, but we can be more deliberate and purposeful. When Gordon gives us the yay, we post it on our website and things like that. So happy to do that.
Thank you.
And we also will have a list from BPS, the construction manager, of who they've sent it out to. So you also will be able to just refer to it and say, well, gee, did A.L. Tyler get a chance to bid on it? You look, oh yeah, they're on the list. Or no, they aren't, so let's call up and get them on. So good idea. Any others before I sort of talk about the next 3 months? Okay, so where are we? Well, where we are is we're hoping in a week and a half to come to the facilities committee, give you a set of drawings with prices and say, here's where we are. We're able to hit the budget. We also will give you a thing called alternates, and alternates go both ways. They go up, they go down. So for example, you may have a parking lot that you say, in case we run with, we have extra money, it would be a good idea to pave the rest of that parking lot. Well, we'll put those things in the packet, and those are things that we can basically cherry pick. You can go down a buffet line at the end, but it's easier to bid it all at the same time because then you get the best prices. So if I'm a paving company, for example, and I know that I'm going to do a 1/4 mile of a road, I'm going to give you a good price. If there's a possibility I might do a 1/2 mile of road, my price might be a little better. Well, then we don't do the 1/2 mile, but we've gotten the better price. So we find it's best to try to do as many alternates right up front. Now to go out about a year, there will be certain things that you're going to want to do that we can't afford right off, judgmental things that you want to do. Let's say you wanted to put in a whole major camera system, for example. That's something that we can decide a year from now. So some of the alternates you may hold on to and say, let's see how we go along on this project. So there will be time also for you. It's not like we close the book. The book is constantly open in a construction manager system. It can't hurt us because it's a fixed price, but it can help us if we can get more out of the deal. So that's to let you know that there'll be 2 ways of things. One is we get the original bids back in. Hopefully they come in lower than we think, and we can take some alternates originally. And then also there's some that we may do down the road. Now, I'll use as an example, Wyndham is a school that I was just out with. Wyndham was up and operating in September, and we're doing alternates right now, and they've been up and running for 6 or 7 months because they ended up with a lot of extra money at the end. And you then look at it and say, well, is it more important to give the money back to the public, or is it more important to pave that extra road? You folks at the school board level will have that determination based on your facilities group will recommend to you, but you certainly will have a say in all of that. It is your money, and we know that. That's how the system works. Ultimately, all of our spending authority comes from you folks.
Hey, Gordon. Norm, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Gordon, I'll ask you a couple questions and then I'll mute myself so you can answer them. My first question is how are we on the BPS contract? Are we good to go? I know about 2 weeks ago we were talking about finalizing that with them. I wanted to see where we were with that. The second thing that I want to discuss with you is we received the budget from you, ideally, in our last meeting where we were talking about it's the ICS budget 001 that we were talking about, and I'd like for you to explain a little bit to the board about soft cost, because on some of these totals, one of the biggest ones that we had talked about in the meeting was the science lab. We want to be able to explain to the public that, we had a budget of 1.9 and then the estimated total was about 523,000 that you guys came back to us with. And I wanted you to kind of explain to the board and how things can fluctuate. But with this amount, it seems like it's a lot. But I want to kind of understand the process and, why we have a big discrepancy on that. So I'll let you take it from there, please.
Okay, now we're getting down to the good meat and potatoes. That's good. Thank you for those. The contract with BPS. BPS's contract, in fact, it was probably a half hour before we got on this call. The last little tweaks of it had come in, and Ken Rubenstein, who's your local person, who's our attorney, he's asking for any comments, of which I have only a minor one, and that thing should be approved tomorrow. There's been no showstoppers with it. I think it's really just been what I call tennis ball, going back and forth between BPS and our attorney, and they go back and forth, and it's time for us. And that's why you folks at your level, when you ask a question, it's like it's certainly telling us why is it still going on. Tomorrow morning's meeting, we meet every Friday on the phone, the working group, and that was going to be the report tomorrow, as we're ready to now sign that. So. Costs, let's talk about soft costs. I'll just give you some rough figures without getting in trouble or getting ahead of myself, but we'll explain to you folks what the budget's looking like at the moment with the 3 schools. Is you had a bonded amount of $9.796 million, and at the current time we're roughly with Maple Street School at $940,000. Harold Martin School is going to come in at about $5.2 million, and the Hopkinton Senior High will be $2.4 million. We then have what's called soft costs, which are another $1.2 million that get divided over those 3 schools, leaving you with just about a balanced budget. And again, we'll go to that and we'll get approval in a week and a half. But what does soft costs mean? Soft costs, I have a breakdown sheet here. There's things that are in the actual budget that you want the contractor to control, but there is also things in the budget that you want the school side to control. So things like, we're going to do a site survey. We had to look at some geotechnical. These are all little things that add up. So a site survey, $6,500. Geotechnical, $6,900. Geotechnical looks at your soils and says, are we going to hit a lot of ledge? Why do you dig? Why do you do that? Well, if you're going to hit a lot of ledge, you want to put that in the budget so that you don't have a surprise coming up. We have things like, there's a certain amount of abatement. There's a certain amount for furniture, fixture, and equipment. You have things like moving costs that come up that you don't think about. Then, of course, you do have the architect, you've got as-built drawings, you've got bonding. So when you add all these things up, they come to about the $1.2 million. Most of that will get equally divided over the 3 projects on a percentage. So for example, where Harold Martin is 50% of the project, they'll get 50% of the soft costs allocated to them. So we'll divide that out. So basically it all evens out on the bookkeeping side. Now, why discrepancies? Which is a good question. You had your company that came and did the study for you, Harriman, did a very good job in many ways, but in other ways, they were too specific on certain dollar amounts, and then that's when you have a flag go up that says, how come they said X for laboratories and laboratories are coming in less? Well, the way that we're bringing the laboratories in less, for example, is we're going to be talking about using the state of New Hampshire penal system as a way in which to build them rather than going out in the open market. Right there, you save a couple $100,000. We also think their figures were off. So these documents that by the time they morphed from your study that you did, the study was good, but when it goes from the study to now, boots on the street, if you will, we get into the more accurate figures and things will move around. The idea of this moving is to have it all move when we sign the contract on each phase, and then we track that. So in other words, it suddenly can't double again and go up double. Each particular building will have about 20 categories that everything's divided down. So if we take Maple Street School, for example, which is $930,000, there'll be 20 line items that tell us how we get to that $930,000. And then we track those individual line items. So for example, if flooring in there is 20,000, we'll see if it suddenly says 35. Wait a minute, what happened here? So it's a way of a check and a balance. But I guess we just want to tell you that between the Harriman study and the current study, there were liable to be some swings in things. Some work to our advantage and some to our disadvantage. So we saved money on the one side on the science studios, we lose somewhere else. Is that a fair answer?
It is, and I want to say Harriman did a great job on the project and everything. I really want to make that clear. I just wanted to provide transparency to the community. If someone comes up to me and says, Norm, when I voted for the budget, when I voted for this bond, it was at 1.9, and now you're telling me it's only going to be 500,000 for the science lab. I want to be able to explain to them, there's going to be a difference in some of the areas that were quoted, but you're still going to get the quality and education in the science lab. So I just don't want them to think that it was fluffed or anything, because I don't feel it was. I feel that, we're being transparent with them and sharing the details very specifically.
And just to help you with that, if you as school board members do get that, you've got me as a tool who I'm happy to sit down with a couple of parents, or if there was 4 or 5 people, and say to them, let's flip through the Harriman versus where we are, and I can sort of show you how some things shrunk, but some things grew. So that's why you bring your construction manager on very early. They do the best guess they could do, an intelligent guess and a professional guess of January of last year. But now that we're into the drawings a little further, some things are going to change. And yes, you are going to find a couple that stand out, but then the public typically tends to fail to see the ones that went the other way that cost us more. So thank you. But again, because it's a public meeting, if anyone through, again, your system, you talk to the superintendent and then he would delegate me, I will be happy to flip through pages on any subject that you get a question like that on, because it can be confusing.
Thanks, Gordon. Rob has a question.
Please, and then I'll go to the future of where we're going. Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Gordon, that's a pretty big difference in a number. I know if I was building that, I'd be pretty excited if somebody came in and told me it was going to cost me 5 and change instead of 1.9. Are there any other ones that truly stand out where the numbers are that different from what was expected? I think about the showers for $250,000 seems a little bit over the top, for example. So do we have anything that's really disparate that should have on our radar screen here? I'll mute myself.
No, and again, just to make sure that I had described it correctly on the particular item that he was talking about, that was the science labs, and it was a difference between, I think it was $1.5 million and like 600,000. So it's rolled into that $5 million figure. So no, I did not see any others that were major, but we'll take, based on this conversation, we'll take a look at them and see if there's any that we should get smarter on so that you can be smarter on them.
Thank you.
Right. We will do that. Where are we going in the next couple months? Well, ideally, again, through your committee process and then coming back to you, we will be saying around the 1st of June that guess what? We're ready to put shovels in the ground. Now, what we had planned on doing this summer was some remodeling of schools, not start new construction until later on in the summer. We are having discussions, I just had this today with the architect, that one of the things that this virus is going to do, it's going to have an impact on lead times on what we call long lead time items. And long lead time items in construction are things like air handling units. It can be flooring. So there are things that it's normally a 12-week delivery period to get an air handler, for example. And this may be a 20-week lead time. Now, we have no pressure because we don't have a deadline to have to finish this, except we want to finish this in our lifetime. And certainly in a couple of, we want to be done in a year and a half. But I'm not so worried about whether we start exactly on June 1st or not. Quite frankly, you make all your money and you make all your best deals before you actually break ground and do something. So this whole virus and its impact, we have not had any hints by the builder yet, and we won't accept any hints that it's going to cost more, because that shouldn't be the case. In fact, I think on the labor side, there's a lot of vendors out there that are scared and they don't have any work now. I talk with contractors, they're all saying, what have you got for little putterings I can do that I can get under the radar of the 10 employees on a site. So I think we're going to be in a great position to be buying things. The negative position we will have, and again, Jay Burgess could chime in on this because he may be buying some with his projects, but I won't put him on the spot, is that I do think big lead time items. Again, I come back to the household. You used to be able to buy a Chevrolet and it had an 8-week delivery time. Well, by the time they fire those plants up again and get going, you might have a 14-week delivery on your Chevrolet. Well, I think we're going to have the same thing on some of our items. So where we might have gone in this summer and done a ton of work, I'm not saying that that's not going to happen, but I have to look you in the eye and say it's crossing all of our minds just because we don't know when the spigot's going to get turned on again. Now, the nice thing is all the bidding and bookkeeping that we're doing, we can be doing all this. So for the next month and a half, it isn't affecting us in preparing everything for the bid packages. And in the people wanting the bid packages, it doesn't harm them because they're ready to sit there and jump on them. What it's really going to be is the deliverables. And we don't know that answer till the spigot gets turned on again and the freedom of the roads comes up. That's anything else? You're on mute.
Oh, there it was. Sorry about that, Jay. Jay, I don't know if you want to hop in there. I saw your hand go up.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to basically reinforce what Gordon has said. I am seeing that currently there, to some extent, the lead time, and I think we need to be sensitive to that. But the labor aspect, there are vendors that we use routinely. We have under contract at my job with the city. They're looking for work now, and I think Gordon hit it on the head. They're looking for work probably for the next 4 to 6 weeks, urgently. After that, I think it's because of the questions that are out there. I think there's also going to be an opportunity as well. So if you had any doubt about the value that the team we put together is going to add to this, it will come in the next month or so when we start to balance the probably a surplus of labor opportunity against the potential of a lack of material availability. And to some extent, I think this is why people like Gordon do project management, because this is where the magic happens. But putting together something, the project, so that we can take advantage of the market on the labor, but not be held back by the lack of certain key long lead time elements, is going to be, it's going to be interesting. But I think that there's opportunity here for the district to hopefully get a little bit more value out of the dollars that we've already allocated. And I think it's important that we mention that we've already allocated that money, or the money's bondable. So if you're a contractor and you've got a $50 million at the, let's say the lint plant down in Exeter, or wherever it is over in the Seacoast, I think the $10 million that the little old town of Hopkinton has might be more valuable than the 50 that they may get, 6 months down the road. So I don't want to beat it to death, but there may be opportunities here that we're primed to take advantage of.
Yep, and thank you. Any other questions, James, or it goes back to you?
Any other questions? Well, I just want to say a few things. First, I want to thank Gordon and Jay for taking time out of the day to come and give this discussion and lead this discussion. It was great. And, we have built a wonderful team. Gordon is our project manager. He's representing the district. But, H.L. Turner has been fantastic to work with, as has BPS. They're very professional teams. And so my observation from watching how the team operates is that all three entities, Gordon, BPS, and H.L. Turner, work extremely well together, which is what we want. We want a team, while they each are doing separate jobs and have separate interests. The fact that they can communicate and work really well together is a huge plus. And so it's a huge credit. And then Ken Rubenstein, who's our construction attorney, has been hands-on, very active, and is serving the district well. And then I just really want to highlight and thank the members of the building committee, several of which are on the call with us here. Norm's been serving on that committee as a board rep. Steve Chamberlain, of course, has been extremely active. Michelle is vice chair of the committee, and adding a ton of value in keeping all the numbers in line. Chris Kelly and all of the building principals are members of the committee and very active. They know the buildings the best. They're bringing a lot of their insights and ideas to the table, and working with their team as well to make sure that this building project meets the needs of our students and meets the needs of our administrators and staff. And so it's been a real pleasure to work with that team and sort of see over the past year how we've grown the team, and then are sort of ready to launch this project. So I just want to thank everybody for the amount of time and effort that they're putting into this, because it is a lot of work, and we're starting to see sort of the fruits of all that labor.
Jim, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I want to thank you for being on the committee also. We've learned a lot from the last year working together with the team you just mentioned, but I also want to say thank you to you for chairing it and really informing and teaching me a lot about the process. And thank you to everyone else on that committee for really just a great group of people who are really did a great job during the interview process, and really just great people that we hired. And I'm looking forward to the next the next 2 years to build a project to get this done. So thank you, Jim.
Or as Gordon said, we're going to build it in our lifetimes. And
Yeah.
so that's a good sign. So as Gordon mentioned, there is going to be a building committee meeting, I think in about a week and a half. Those meetings are public. They will not be in-person meetings. The meetings will be done over, probably over Zoom, like this meeting. And so that information will be sent out both to the community, and the board will be aware of when that meeting happens. And the assumption is, probably our second meeting in April. This board will probably get a pretty good update from the building committee with maybe some recommendations and look at those schematics and dive in a little deeper in either the second meeting in April or maybe our first meeting in May, depending on our calendar. So with that, if there's no other questions, and I'm not seeing any hand raised or arms waving, we'll move on. If Gordon and Jay, if you guys want to stick around, you're more than welcome. But I totally understand if there's dinner in the oven and you guys are looking for a quick exit. We want to very much thank you for your time and very much appreciate it. And we won't, nothing will be held against you if you guys decide to leave our virtual meeting.
Thank you.
And Jim, my question is, do we have any members of the community online that have questions now, or is that something that's not going to happen in this format?
Yeah, we're not going to do that in this format today, but the community is invited to the building committee meetings, obviously, and then we're going to work out our own internal process, how to take the public comments and questions, and we'll probably share that as well with the building committee so that when you guys are meeting virtually, the committee can be able to do that as well. But we're going to probably not do it tonight.
Okay, fair enough. I'm available with the SIU email address, and people can find me there, or they can find Steve and he can direct me. So we want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to ask any questions that might come up, because we've had the benefit of being in the weeds on this for many years, but as people begin to join and get excited about the project, we want to make sure that we get those questions answered.
That's great. Thanks, Jay. And yeah, for anybody listening, there is on the district website a link to the building committee, and there are all the minutes, all the materials that we've been referencing are there. And thank you, Jay. I bet you'll get some calls, so we really appreciate it. All right, so we're going to move on in our agenda, and the next item we have is items for board discussion. And so I'm going to turn it over to Steve to give an update on the school distance learning and any updates that he wants to provide. Thanks, Steve.
Sure, happy to, and it'll be brief as we talked last week too. Just a couple of themes. Really admire the staff, from support staff all the way through principals to the director of student services, how they've approached this with the opportunity to learn, to engage. I've learned a lot. Jim and I have talked about how much we both enjoy learning. This has really provided me an opportunity to look at things differently. I've learned from everybody. We built this with a task force, teacher and principals, administrators together, which I think was the right approach. Try to keep consistent answers to questions, but it's certainly a design build. But everybody from top to bottom has approached this with what's best for kids and how to do it well. So very, very, very much an admiration and appreciation to all the staff. Just a couple of sections. I tried to grab everybody today. Matt Stone, Director of Technology, we provided 17% of our students with devices. Most of those are grades 2 through 5. And a significant number of those are when families needed, just because a number of kids at home needed a second device or even a third device to support the number of kids who were working at the same time. I spent some time with Becky, the director, the student service support. Got a chance to talk with a couple of instructional assistants, special educators today. As from the administrative level, we're trying to get a lot of direction, and there's so much information coming so fast about how do we do this and deadlines and waivers. So Becky's trying to sort all that out. We have some staff who are virtually attending class with some in support, which is fun to watch and see. Certainly, we have some staff that kids are coming in and out of connection and engagement. So that's something we're trying to work with as well. In some, it's a different medium. So we're trying to provide executive function support for some kids and some families on how they manage the devices and the in and out in Google Classroom. Today was day 4. So one of the things that I had interviews today, and what are you most proud of in our district? We wrap our hands around families and kids pretty well. We have a tremendous amount of care for each person, and that's been exhibited quite frequently. I spent some time with a couple of with John and Scott and talking with union leadership. Very interesting. There's a continuum. Some kids who are appreciating this type of environment little distraction. There's not 3 people next to them. They're more focused. It's more concise. We don't have any athletic dismissals. We don't have announcements coming in. So in some respect, it's a concentrated piece. But we also have, sometimes it's harder to catch some kids. They go in and out. So we do see a continuum as we do in school. And we're learning about this. But some believe for some kids, they see kids flourishing with this kind of concentrated event, reducing distractions. At the elementary level, Bill and I just talked briefly about, some of this is packet driven, as we talked about last week, and with the new executive order, how are we really going to get packets of the next iteration? We planned for a couple of weeks. So we're trying to figure out logistics about when it's not just virtual, when there still is packet and some support there. Some of the themes I've tried to, as Norm mentioned, Bill's, I think, Bill's videos, which are wonderful. I've done a minute, just a quick update from the superintendent. So we're learning new tools, which I love, and trying to really put forth the theme of just focus on getting better. And give yourself permission. It's not perfect. It won't be perfect today. It probably won't be perfect next week, but try and focus on getting better. With the announcement today, we'll look at a leadership team meeting and say how now it is not just a couple of week thing, it's a 5-week process to May. I know Norm had a question and others already have questions. How does this impact April vacation? If we are in this kind of environment, do we look at a different model? But we'll be addressing those as a leadership team soon. We also, the leadership team and a couple of the people are reviewing some surveys. We're going to put surveys together, just after the first week to see how we're doing, checking with families, checking on their food security, checking on their internet, check in on, are they feeling overwhelmed, the amount of work. We're trying to balance everything. I had a chance to talk with a teacher who has a 1- and 3-year-old at home. So managing teaching full time and a 1- and 3-year-old. I'm pretty thankful that that's not my scenario right now with a 16-year-old and 21-year-old. So there's a lot of different dynamics going on that we're trying to be sensitive and trying to really encourage breathing, giving yourself permission to get better at this, and trying to alleviate some of this pressure of try to perform. It's going to be a journey with going all the way out to the first week in May. It's going to take some perseverance and some resilience and some permission to breathe and try things and get better at it. I can tell you I've been incredibly impressed by the amount of, I said this last week, professional development, teachers teaching teachers, teachers providing resources to teachers. It really is a collaborative team effort, and it's been an honor to observe it from my perch. And I'll continue to provide updates. But I hope, for the second meeting, the leadership team and I will have something to take a look at about what schools are doing and maybe some recommendations about April break. I'm not sure it makes sense if we're going to be like this, not to continue with school. I have to talk with everybody about that. If we're in home, there might be, if we get to June might be better to be more free, use the time where we recoup with school, but we'll talk about that next couple of weeks. Questions for me?
You mentioned about June. Like, are you talking about extending school past June? Or are you thinking that it would be a drop dead date where you would say we're done for the year? That's where I was trying.
Good question. No, I appreciate that. So I think the 180-day piece has been waived already. So I think
Okay.
We have more flexibility. But if we do use April vacation, that would impact the end of school as well.
Okay. But you'll have a decision probably, I don't want to say a decision, a recommendation from your team within like a week or so.
Yeah. We've got a school administrators call tomorrow. We'll see what everybody else is doing. But yeah, we've already started thinking about what happens in April vacation, how else we can do it.
Right.
So
Yeah, I mean, it's funky. It's funky, Steve. And I just want to say, real quickly, Matt Stone was available when I needed a Chromebook this weekend. And everyone's been very helpful, and I just want to make it very clear. I'm very thankful for the support. And I'll also say the attention of the teachers. Being a dad learning this for the week, I forgot to have my son reply to the daily meeting, and I got a phone call at work saying, "Where's your son?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And they said he didn't reply. And to me, that was a great feeling, because that means the teachers are reaching out to the students if they're not hearing from them. It's distant learning, but we don't forget about you. So I just want to say it was really, really great to hear that a mistake on my part shows that the procedure in place that you have is working. So thank you very much.
And we're worried about it. We're trying to catch kids, families. Some have gone quiet. We have different tiers of interaction. Our school counselors, we have your behavior support people. So our nurses, we are trying to connect with kids in different venues. The number it got smaller earlier in the week. Secondary, we had about 20 youngsters that we hadn't heard from. That's now to a very few. But we are trying to wrap our arms around families who there's a different dynamic in families all over. So how we support them, but we want to catch them. We did send, I don't know if you got it at home, we did send the Hopkinton School District Connects, the snail mail to every family, trying to, again, offer it to people who may not be. And we're trying to work with families who don't have internet access and see if there's things we can do.
Thanks, Steve. Andrea.
Yeah, Steve, I was wondering if you've heard anything about state testing, what they're planning on doing about it or not doing.
Right now, the commissioner, we have not waived state testing. One of the things that he really wants to work with the vendors, trying to negotiate the best, extension of the contract or alter the contract if we go in the fall or if we go next year. So he has not omitted it, because he wants to work with vendors to get the best deal for New Hampshire as he can. But that's one of the, Becky and I spoke about that today, how state testing would work in this environment. We're not sure. So the expectation is they'll negotiate an extension and maybe the same price for next year, and trying to make it to be as constructive and supportive of the state funding as he can.
Okay, would that then mean, though, that like our current juniors would need to test next year, or they would just not test?
That's one of the things that so many of our kids would like to take the SAT and take it a couple of times. So we think the SAT will probably be done anyway. It's just a matter of when, because those kids will need to, most of those will need that, or at least enjoy that experience for the next iteration.
Rob.
Hey, Steve. So has there been any discussion about maybe changing the 5-day-a-week model to a 4-in-1, where teachers are with kids 4 days and then they've got a day to catch up and do what they've got to do? It seems like it's pretty intense or more intense in some ways. I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion about that kind of thing.
Yes, I actually talked to Bill. I talked to Scott and John about that with the HEA today. I talked to Matt. Yes, those discussions have begun, especially if we absorb April break. That might be a really good model, the 4-in-1. Scott has a unique experience because he has an elementary one at home, but he's a secondary. And he could definitely, and John both felt that model could be really beneficial to parents and teachers. And that's something that, Rob, I appreciate that. I think that model could be a real beneficial for our community. So yes, that is something we've had preliminary, but I thought we'd have an expansive discussion with LT this week.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Steve, I have one quick question for you.
Sure.
There's no one going into the school right now, from your understanding, is there much activity going to the school since we last talked?
So remember, we were in the schools if it was purposeful and it was necessary.
Okay.
Obviously, with the lockdown, Michelle and I have spoken already, and certainly, for example, food service is considered an essential component. So food service would continue. And then if there's a food service, we do need some custodial work to clean those surfaces. We'd have to set some parameters about what is essential to go in. We'd also like to give a window. Just me declaring tomorrow that they're completely off limits could be it could be a hardship for some of the teachers and some of the families. They may need some things from our school because that wasn't expected.
Start till midnight tomorrow night.
I'm sorry, what's that? Oh, sorry.
I would just ask if you're not speaking, if you could please mute your phones. Thanks.
So the key component is what is essential, and then how do we make sure everyone is safe. To be honest, I went into the office a couple of times this week. I can't say that was an essential act. It was alone in the office. It was a little bit different than at home, but certainly it would have to be essential for us to go in. But I would like to give a grace period for some people to do it, excuse me, so they could get whatever they needed. There was a teacher, as we described, who was filming some videos and some demos in a science lab, but I think there's probably ways around that at this point. But yes, the only essential directive from the governor will change our practice.
Andrea?
Oh, I was just going to add, I believe too, though, that even if I know we do not currently have a shelter in place. We have a stay-at-home directive. And I believe that going into school in order to teach for distant learning, I think that is still considered essential. So I believe if those teachers need to go in to do their cool science experiments, they would still be allowed to do so, which is great.
So Andrea, thank you. I haven't seen the full order yet. I'm sure it'll be on the agenda for tomorrow, but I appreciate that heads up.
Yeah.
Our goal is to make sure everyone is safe and provide what they need. But those are the questions that we're going to have to answer as I spoke about packets, and educational materials for the next 5 weeks or so. So thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions, we can move on to personnel. Steve?
Sure. Just real quick. So I wanted to provide an update where we are on the Director of Student Service search. We had 8 candidates. 7 I did phone interviews. I think I wrote about this in board notes. And then I went from the 7 to 4. And today we finished our stakeholders or constituency interviews. So we had 9-10 people interview 4 candidates through Zoom. All 4 were absolutely qualified, and everyone on the team said all 4 they would be very comfortable doing the job, which was a really good feeling. We're going to debrief tomorrow, our second debrief tomorrow, and we'll send either 2 or 3 to leadership team next week. And then depending on how that goes, it could be 1 or 2 to the board the following week. My hope is to get the candidate to the board by the second meeting in April. That's after all the reference checks and everything vetted, but the candidate to the board, I think that's like the 16th-ish or something like that in April. It's going very well. The candidates were very strong and kind of get used to the Zoom form as well, and I think everybody handled it really well.
That's great news, Steve.
Questions for me about the Director of Student Services search?
Just one quick question. Becky will be working with the individual until she's leaving, just to kind of give some training and everything?
Yes, as we have, there'll be some transition time.
Okay.
For Becky to work, and this will help us with the timing of this hire, which, by all intents will be the 2nd or 3rd week in April, gives us some, over 2 months of transition time. And knowing Becky, she's going to be extraordinarily generous during her last couple of months, but she's also not going very far. So she'll be on the phone helping as well.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Any other questions for me? Everybody, whoop, I see a hand up.
Hey, Steve, this is actually, sorry, I should ask this sooner on the distance learning part. How are things going with guidance in terms of class signups and all of that kind of stuff at the high school? Is that underway, or are they working on a process to figure that out?
Yeah, Rob, great question. I think that was tabled a little bit as they got this new school going, but I suspect it'll kick into gear next week. One thing I'm glad you mentioned, Rob, is one thing I appreciate, Corrine, she's doing a Google Classroom group for seniors who are, and Ella can speak to this, who are really struggling. Their vision of their senior year is a lot different. And actually it was a community member that reached out to me who works with some of our youngsters and said, Steve, it might be worth getting some kids together so they can talk about and process what a different senior year looks like. And Kareen is, of course, leading that initiative and working with kids, and it's different. And so I appreciate Kareen supporting our seniors, giving them a chance to process. You know, they had hopes of senior seasons and proms and graduations, and who knows, but we know for sure it's different. So thank you for that mention, because I think our school counseling staff is doing a great job.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Oh, Ella, I want to give you the opportunity because you were brought up. I don't know if you want to add or say anything about how that's going.
Yeah, Mrs. LaJoy, or as Steve says, Kareen, got together a group, and it was actually really productive, and a lot of seniors really felt like they were able to express their opinions about the whole remote learning thing. And she actually scheduled another meeting for us to talk with her next week because she had to leave for another meeting. But it worked out really well, and I think a lot of seniors really appreciated being heard.
Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. All right, Steve, you want to go on to the notice of no return and the revised contract?
Sure. So just very quickly, we've been noticed that Tiffany Bauer will not be returning next year. We just want to publicly thank her and provide that notice of non-return. It's not a resignation. She will be completing this school year, but she won't be returning next. So that's an action item. And then we have one of our teachers out on medical leave. And so Matt Christie is going to pick up supporting a wood technology class remotely. I actually had a chance to speak with Matt today about his plans and thoughts on how to use what parents and students have at home. And also, before the decision today, we thought we could we still may be able to deliver wood and some supplies as Matt leads a remote wood technology class. So that will, because he's picking up an extra class, that's a revised contract. We're not sure how long this is. We're waiting to hear from Mr. Lavasu, who's our teacher, but it's pretty up in the air right now. But Matt's going to pick this up starting, I think he started on Monday. And that's an action item as well.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions or comments from the board on either of those two items? All right. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to move us forward. We have a meeting scheduled for next Thursday, which will be our next meeting. And so that agenda and materials will be coming out beginning early next week. And we'll be doing that meeting again, as I assume we're going to be doing many of our meetings probably through May in this format. So thank you. And so we have two action items to vote on tonight. And so I am going to ask if there's a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to accept HMS instructional assistant Tiffany Bauer's notice of non-return.
So moved.
So the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll start with Norm.
Norm Gupel is a yes.
Seth?
Seth A. Frame, yes.
Rob?
Rob Nato, yes.
Andrea?
Andrea Folsom, yes.
And Jim O'Brien is a yes. So that has been approved with regrets, 5-0. And is there a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to approve a revised contract, an additional 0.1 FTE for wood technology teacher Matt Christie, effective March 23rd, duration to be determined by the superintendent of schools?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll start with Norm.
Norm Gupel is a yes.
Seth?
Seth A. Frame votes yes with thanks.
Rob?
Yes.
You gotta say your name.
You gotta say your name.
Rob Nato says yes. Sorry.
No, perfect. Andrea?
Andrea Folsom says yes.
And Jim O'Brien says yes. So that is it for our action items. Steve, is there a need for a non-public this evening?
I think we're fine. We're meeting next week anyways. I think we'll be fine, Jim, but thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, so I just want to close by sort of finishing where I started, maybe, is to thank everybody for your patience and for your understanding, and for participating fully in this this sort of virtual online meeting. I know it's not always easy and there's tons of distractions, but we're going to have to get used to it. So I want to thank everybody for joining, and especially again want to thank Ella, Michelle, Gordon, and Jay for joining us, and for the great information that we have. So for the members of the public, please join us again next week, next Thursday. We'll bring back public comment. Apologize again for not being able to do that tonight, but we'll definitely do that moving forward. All of our contact information for board members is on the website. So we're all reachable. So if you have something that you heard tonight that you want to comment or share your thoughts, please do. And then if you send it to any one of us, we'll make sure it gets into the correspondence folder so all the board members are able to see it in between meetings. And with that, I think—
Jim, one question, Jim?
Yeah, please, Norm, go.
Do you think you'll have like a procedure in place before the board meeting in case the public has any questions on how they participate in this meeting, whether or not they want to submit something in writing, or do you think you'll have such a procedure in place by then?
Yeah, so I'm going to work with Steve and Andrea and probably Matt to kind of figure out exactly what the best way to do that. And I know that the select board is also obviously doing virtual meetings, and so they may have, we might work with them too to try to be consistent in how we're approaching this. So I hope so, Norm, that by early next week we'll have a process, and if we have it that we can send that to the community, we surely will. And if not, we invite people to come on, and then notes and emails and comments are welcome anytime. And so just encourage people that they do have thoughts that they should send them along. Awesome. And so with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
So moved. Oh, second.
So I've learned that motions to adjourn are non-debatable, which is great. So all in favor? Aye. All right. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks, Steve and Michelle.
Thank you.
Bye, Ella.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.
Ah.